Have you finished setting? So thank you so much for coming and being first visit. My name is Untitled. I'm a communications officer at International Zambia, and we're going to have an opening prayer. So I'll ask any volunteer to pray for us. Does anyone volunteer? Who can I bring that? Thank you so much, Mr. Benga. So we're going to have a quick round of introductions, and I'll start with the high table before we can round everything. So I'll begin with the far right. This is Ms. Kamita Halingi, and she's the CCES coordinator, climate change and environmental sustainability coordinator at Transparency International Zambia. And then we have Mr. Maurice Kenyambe, who's our executive director. Then we have Mrs. Priscilla Chikonde Chansa, she's our president at Transparency International Zambia. And then at the far left, we have Mr. Raymond Mutale. He's our head of programs at Transparency International Zambia. And then International Zambia is a member. So as you know, there's a difference between retired and membership. So membership provides oversight to the organization. Those who did not know. Yes, and then we have Mrs. I usually forget the name. Sikasula. Yes, Mrs. Martha Sikasula. And she's the head of social welfare chairperson of the welfare. And then we have Mrs. Chewe, who is the Chewe, who is the CIZ member. So we can begin introduction.
My name is Chambo. Good morning, my name is Jesus John.
My name is Israel.
Good morning,
Good morning, my name is Grace here from Ghana.
I'm calling you.
Also at the concept,
So,
Good morning, from Hungary.
Good morning, my name is Yahya Mumba from Lusaka, Zambia.
Morning, my name is Mulan Kwamba.
Conrad from KBN.
Sylvia Suzanne.
Stand up, drop one candle.
Thank you so much. So we are going to start from myself. I think I introduced myself when I began. Okay, I'm Zanji Sinkara, I'm the communication officer. So now we're going to jump right into it, and we'll have welcoming remarks by the executive director.
All right, thank you, Zanji, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and compliments of the season. We are very excited to have you here with us this morning for this for this end of year press briefing. Now, you colleagues in the media will know that we always have this briefing at the end of each year. And the idea really is for us to reflect on what has happened over the course of the year. As you know, there has been quite a lot in terms of the governance arena and even just the anti-corruption issues in general that have happened throughout 2024. And so the idea really is for us to reflect on some of the things that we have spoken about. And so in our reflection today, we'll be looking at some of the issues that maybe we may have spoken about over the course of the year that we feel still needs to be highlighted. But there may be also one or two new things that we may not have necessarily spoken about over the course of the year. But the idea really is for us to just give a reflection of how the year has been in terms of the governance issues, in terms of the anti-corruption arena. And so the statement that we're going to be releasing today, which of course will be read by our chapter president, will touch on a diverse range of issues. And we are hoping that we are going to have a very good engagement at the end of it all with you, our colleagues in the media, seeking maybe further clarity on some of the things that we may have mentioned. So with that, it is now my honor and privilege to invite our chapter president, Ms. Msila Chansa, to go ahead and read our statement for the end of the year, after which there will be an engagement. And sorry, before I proceed, actually, I just needed to give a special welcome to our members. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you support us. You have been with us throughout the year, and you are still here at the end of the year. And we hope that even next year you will continue to support us and we'll be seeing more of you. So with that, I now hand it over to Mrs. Chansa to get into our end of year statement for 2024. Thank you. Thank you. Are you done setting up before she starts?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this press briefing as we reflect on Zambia's governance and the corruption landscape over the past year. The journey through 2024 has been a mix of progress, setbacks, and ongoing challenges that highlight the complexities of fostering accountability and good governance in our nation. As we reflect on 2024 today, we will highlight what we see as areas where progress has been scored, while also highlighting the critical areas that require immediate and long-term intervention. This year began on a hopeful note, with Zambia's improved performance in the Corruption Perception Index, CPI, from 33 to 37. An achievement that raised expectations of a strengthened fight against corruption. This improvement, announced in January 2024, seemed to signal a renewed vigor in addressing corruption at all levels. However, the euphoria of this milestone quickly waned as systematic challenges persisted, threatening to undermine the progress in combating public sector corruption measured by the CPI. Amid this landscape, the launch of the National Policy on Anti-Corruption in May 2024 provided a beacon of possibility. The policy sets out Zambia's ambitious objectives to tackle corruption comprehensively, but its promise remains tied to the effectiveness of its implementation. Without tangible actions and robust monitoring mechanisms, even the best intentioned policies risk becoming mere rhetoric. The challenge therefore remains that there's need for comprehensive implementation of the national policy on anti-corruption. As merely having a policy, as good as the policy is, will not lead to the anti-corruption outcomes that the police has envisioned. On this same score, we wish to reiterate our continued commitment to work with the government and other stakeholders to ensure that the objectives of the national policy on anti-corruption are realized. Despite these positive developments, certain unresolved issues continue to cast a shadow over Zambia's progress in tackling existing governance and corruption challenges. The investigation into the Solicitor General, Mr. Marshall Mujende, State Counsel, is a case in point. Allegations surrounding his conduct were serious enough to warrant an investigation, as confirmed by the Anti-Corruption Commission, and yet the matter appears to have died a natural death. This silence undermines public trust and raises questions about the independence of its investigative processes. Equally troubling is the lack of action by the President to suspend the Solicitor General during the investigation period. Such inaction sends a dangerous signal that accountability is negotiable when it involves individuals in positions of influence. We therefore urge the SEC to provide a comprehensive update to the nation on how far the investigations into the Solicitor General have gone. We reiterate our position earlier this year that this investigation will be a litmus test for the UPND administration's professed commitment to the fight against corruption, especially when the allegations concern a key member of the administration. Equally disconcerting was the SEC disclosure that several cabinet ministers are under investigation for suspected acts of corruption. Yet these individuals continue to hold office rather than being suspended in order to pave way for unhindered investigations. This has continued to raise profound concerns about the government's commitment to transparency and accountability in general, and to the anti-corruption agenda in particular. The reluctance of the SEC to name these ministers and that of the Republican president to suspend the ministers while they're being investigated undermines public confidence in governance structures and in the extent of the administration's commitment to the fight against corruption. The situation is compounded by the prolonged leadership vacuum following the resignation of its Director General and the dissolution of its board a few months. The absence of substantive leadership hampers the Commission's operational effectiveness and could potentially lead to a reversal of any positive. We are of the view that this situation is not ideal and we must rectify it without further delay. Turning to the Mopani compromise transaction, this year saw significant confusion over the nature and transparency of the deal. In November, the Minister of Mine characterized the transaction as a reallocation of shares through ZCCM IH, distancing it from being labeled as a sell or transfer. Yet these semantics have done little to allay concerns about the opaque manner in which the deal was conducted. Public confidence demands clear and comprehensive disclosure of the transaction details, particularly in the light of the financial stakes involved and their implication for Zambia's mining sector. As TIZ, we will continue not only keenly follow the developments surrounding the Mopani issue, but also seek further information on it. And we hope to be able to give our comprehensive position on it over the course of the coming year. Another issue that continues to cause concern has to do with the Office of the Auditor General, where systematic vulnerabilities that need urgent attention have continued to be at play. There's a pressing need for the government to appoint a substantive Auditor General as mandated by the Constitution Amendment Act No. 2 of 2016. The prolonged reliance on an acting Auditor General undermines the independence of this critical oversight institution, as the protective measures, including formal procedures for removal, do not extend to individuals acting in this capacity. On that same score, we urge the government to adhere to the constitutional provisions for the one holding this position, including the provision in Article 252, which specifies the age of 60 as being the age at which the Auditor General shall retire. We note that various stakeholders have raised concern about the current office holder being past the retirement age, and we urge the government to urgently and decisively respond to these concerns. Beyond this, TIZ urges the government to operationalize the Public Audit Act of 2016 and the State Audit Commission Act of 2016. These laws are pivotal for ensuring the administrative and financial independence of the Office of the Auditor General, enabling it to function effectively as a cornerstone of public accountability. Strengthening this institution is not merely a constitutional obligation, but a necessity to safeguard public resources and enhance governance systems. Another area of concern is that several promises of governance reforms made by the UPND administration remain largely unfulfilled, despite repeated commitments at various international and local platforms. Constitutional reforms, a flagship pledge outlined in the 8th National Development Plan, have stalled, and the lack of transparency around the government's plans not only deepens public skepticism. While the administration initially highlighted constitutional reforms as a cornerstone of its governance agenda, little progress has been made and no clear roadmap has been provided. This opacity has left stakeholders in the dark and raises doubts about the sincerity of the government's commitment to such a critical undertaking. We urge the government to end this continued opacity by announcing in no uncertain terms the roadmap that they will follow in the constitutional making process. On this score, in the event that the government does not consider this to be a priority, an open and honest conversation with the Zambian people must take place rather than letting speculation take root. Ladies and gentlemen, the current administration's failure to implement asset declaration and lifestyle audits is another missed opportunity to demonstrate transparency and accountability. While the Operation Recovery, a strategy promised in the UPND manifesto, has been actualized, the absence of a comprehensive asset declaration mechanism undermines efforts to hold leaders accountable. This omission leaves critical questions unanswered about the wealth and financial dealings of key office holders, including the president and the vice president. We therefore retaliate our call for the enactment of a comprehensive asset and liability declaration law that will address this critical area. We also wish to remind the government that Parliament passed a motion in December 2021, moved by Mwembeshi UPND Member of Parliament, Honorable Mashida Jamba, to introduce legislation on lifestyle audits. To date, no such bill has been tabled before the House, and we urge government to actualize that commitment in the new year. Another key concern throughout this year has been the proliferation of consent judgments, often seen as the means of resolving disputes efficiently, but which have been, in many cases, become a conduit for questionable financial settlement or compensations. The case involving Kaiser Zulu epitomizes this concern, highlighting the potential for judgments to be exploited for personal gain. The lack of transparency in these processes not only undermines legal integrity, but poses a significant threat to public resources. The wider concern around this is that it appears that such compensations are almost exclusively being paid to those affiliated to the UPND administration. And in a climate where the vast majority of Zambians are struggling to make ends meet, dishing out large sums of taxpayers' money in the manner we have seen does not demonstrate prudence in the management of public resources. We urge the administration to take this matter with the seriousness it deserves and to bring a complete stop to it. This year has also seen troubling encroachments on democratic freedoms. Opposition parties are faced undue restrictions on their right to peaceful assembly, a fundamental liberty enshrined in Zambia's constitution. Instances of selective law enforcement and intimidation of dissenting voices further highlight the shrinking space for political pluralism. Such actions erode public trust and contradict the principles of fairness and inclusivity that underpin a functioning democracy. We therefore urge the government in general and the Ministry of Home Affairs and the police in particular to resist the temptation of trampling on citizens' freedom. Instead, they should facilitate citizens' enjoyment of those freedoms as long as they are not breaking the law or causing any disorder. The absence of legislation to regulate political party financing remains a glaring gap in Zambia's governance architecture. Without a transparent framework, political parties backed by big funders continue to benefit disproportionately from financial advantages, skew electoral competition while exposing the country to the risk of state and policy capture. The enactment of the Political Parties Bill is long overdue, and we urge government to take significant steps in actualizing this. This legislation is not only for leveling the political playing field, but also for reducing the risks of policy capture and electoral corruption. The health and education sectors have not been spared from governance challenges. The case involving the Health Permanent Secretary, Professor Christopher Simonga, who is alleged to have awarded a 6.8 million contract to a company linked to his other affiliation, underscores the systematic nature of corruption in public procurement. Similarly, the Ministry of Education's unauthorized 3.6 million kwacha procurement, which placed financial burdens on schools, highlights the need for stricter adherence to procurement laws. These cases are emblematic of broader governance failures that demand comprehensive reforms. We commend the President for taking swift action to act on the Health Permanent Secretary, but we urge for similar decisive action on other government officials who've been accused of corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, land administration and management has also presented several concerns all through the year. Among these are land tenure security issues, especially for customary landholders, who include marginalized groups such as women, youth, and personnel with disabilities. Further, in the face of the economic expansion through large-scale land-based investments such as the mining, agriculture, forestry, and climate change mitigation efforts, land tenure systems for communities are affected. In cases where displacements have occurred, ensuring transparency and fairness in the compensation processes remains problematic. Corruption in the land sector is rife, as evidenced by several reports which we have received through our legal advice for citizens throughout the year. With the opportunity of strengthening the land sector legal framework through the Lands Bill of 2024, TIZ looks forward to a participatory process with honest reflections, taking on board key stakeholders to foster transparent, equitable, and corruption-free land governance. As we conclude 2024, it is evident that Zambia stands at a crossroads. The progress made this year offers hope, but the challenges we've outlined raise the urgent need for decisive action. TIZ remains steadfast in its commitment to advocating for transparency, accountability, and democratic governance. We urge the government to fulfill its promises and build a corruption-free society that upholds the principles of justice and equity for all Zambians. Thank you, and may God bless Zambia.
Thank you so much, Steve. So now we are going to get into the answer session. So please limit your questions to what has been spoken here. And we can have the first 3 questions. Any questions? Or any comments pertaining to the statement? No questions.
Don't chase me and Mrs. Chance after this. So I think interviewing is now.
Yes, one name is also again. When the statement talks about the I'd like to get more details on that, and then be able to section on some of the by-elections that we had, how the mood has been compared to the past. Because, the one who are there now for the current government always compare with the past. So previously we were this, and now we're seeing more peace compared to them. So when you talk about the democratic freedom, I can say more clarification on that.
Thank you, Oswald. Any other questions? Yes.
My name is Shambamu from David. Do you see any drive from the executive to address some of the challenges which define the year 2024? Do you see any sort of impetus from them to address some of the issues we have addressed?
Thank you. Any other question? For the responses? Yes. So, my question goes to something we can work on the just really analyze how to do this office as a to the public. Okay, so we can have our first set of responses.
Okay, maybe first, take two questions. Part of this question relating to by-elections and comparisons that are being made between the previous regime and the current regime. I also speak to the issue of the effectiveness of the office of the public. To begin with, I think that I'll give a simple example. If my friend was getting low average in class, and then I start comparing myself to a friend that was getting below average, what standards am I setting for myself? As non-state actors, I think we find this concerning because we made a clear decision as citizens of Zambia to change the ruling party. And some of the reasons why we decided in that manner is because we were not happy with some of the things that were happening. For the current government to keep on comparing themselves to what we rejected, I think is not acceptable. Now, we are just coming from observing a by-election in Kawambwa. You might have heard, of course, we will issue a comprehensive report, but incidents of sporadic violent activities are still there from both the opposition and the ruling party. But I think for us as non-state actors, we should go beyond partisan activity and say, what do we want to see in our country? What kind of politics do we call mature politics? What kind of politics will bring about the development that we desire as a country? To start commenting on, in my view, low-level standard, and we are caught up in that game and web, I think will not help us as a country. I think we should be asking clear questions. What high standards are you setting for yourselves as a ruling party? And we'll assess you based on those high standards. Do we want to continue using violence as a means to sell ourselves in terms of whether we can deliver development or not? Definitely not. I think that we need ideas that will give confidence to the people. We need ideas that will assure us that the development that we desire as a country will actually be delivered. The issue regarding the Office of the Public Protector. Of course, in the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen an improvement in terms of budgetary allocation in this office. We've seen them trying to do something to ensure that they are visible. They are reaching out to stakeholders to collaborate on a number of things, and we are part of those that they reached out to. But I think we need to do more and make this office visible. First of all, as citizens, we think it's only the Anti-Corruption Commission that can deal with issues around public service delivery. But this office is very, very cardinal in ensuring that the way public officials deliver their services are according to the prescribed processes, procedures, and standards. But as long as we do not know that a small concern that I can have when I'm accessing service, say I want to get an NRC, and a public official behaves in a manner that is not in line with what they are expected to do, and I don't know where to report, I'll send it to ACC. But as long as that complaint does not fall within their remit, they may not act on it. But what does that do to me? I lose confidence, not only in ACC, in government generally. So I think there is more that needs to be done with the Office of the Public Protector, because issues around maladministration fall under their mandate. Issues around ensuring that citizens understand the simple steps to access public services, those fall under their mandate. And I think the Office of the Public Protector should come out in the open and be strong on ensuring that they publicize the service charters, because the service charters are the tools that will help you to understand what happens at each stage. When you are agreed at any stage, what you need to do. And we've been supporting public institutions, but I think there is more that needs to be done in terms of publicizing those things, but also ensuring that we create, and I think this is a challenge even as civil society, that when we go to communities, how are we educating the citizens? How are we empowering them to start asking questions? There cannot be accountability without transparency. Because once I have information through transparency, then I have a basis to ask a question. So as long as we are not communicating that with citizens, I think we will not achieve what we need to achieve. So in terms of effectiveness, I think there is more that needs to be done for that office. It is a very important office, and the challenge is to governments to, I think, allocate more resources towards that office, help it to set up offices in provinces and districts, and that way, I think people will understand the relevance of the office and utilize the office. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add as well, let me speak about 2 quick things. Also, I was talking about the democratic space, and maybe in addition to what the head of programs have mentioned, I think for us, our concern really, when we raise the issue of shrinking civic space, but also relating that to the comparisons that are being made in terms of what is happening now versus what was happening then. First of all, as the head of programs has mentioned, we don't think that the comparison should be made directly in that way, in the manner that it's being done. Because like we have noted repeatedly, if you have your baseline, which was way below the accepted standard, if you then just rise, just above what was there, but it is still below the accepted standard, then for us that doesn't really warrant any positive comparison in that sense. We think that the comparison that the current administration should be making should be based on what they said they were going to do differently, because they did say in their manifesto that they were going to do things that are quite different, and we think that that is the standard that they should hold themselves. So don't focus or compare yourselves with what was happening back then. Because back then the standard was way below what's accepted. But rather look at what you said you were going to deliver, and that then should become a mark for comparison. I mean, when you look at some of the things now, you will know that there are things that are happening now that we're still seeing back then. When we talk about opposition political parties being denied the opportunity to hold rallies, for example, when you look at radio programs that are featuring people that are speaking, that are giving dissenting views, being attacked and cadres are breaking in, we are seeing these things again happen. When you talk about even in the past by-election in Kawamba, for example, where you suddenly have empowerment programs being accelerated in a particular area where the by-election is happening. These are things that have been happening all these years. But then there was a promise that things were going to be done differently. So when we begin to see the same things happening, it causes us to raise these critical concerns. And I think the challenge that we are throwing to the administration is basically that they should do what they promised and really show that they are different from what we were seeing in the past, because that is why Zambia voted for change. What is assumed that is why Zambia voted for change. Let me quickly talk about the Chamber's question about whether we are seeing any impetus from the executive in terms of addressing these particular challenges that we have highlighted in our statement. And the simple answer to that is that we are not seeing much in terms of impetus to address these issues, which is precisely why we are bringing back these issues in the statement that we have just released today. So yes, in terms of maybe verbally committing to addressing certain things, the verbal commitment is there, but I think we've seen verbal commitment even from previous regimes. But for us, it's not about what is being said. As correct as it might be, or as positive as it might be, the proof of the pudding is always in what is actually being done, what is happening. So our challenge to the administration is that don't just focus on saying the correct things. We would like to see more of those correct things actually being done, as opposed to just being stated. So to answer the question, we're really not seeing much in terms of the actions that should be taken in order to correct these anomalies. And that is precisely why we are raising them, even in our statement today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Would anyone else like to comment on any questions before we open it up for the next round of questions?
I think for me, it's just an issue in terms of freedom of assembly association. I think the concerns that have been raised over the public have been there for the last over 2 decades. And what we're saying is we are seeing little change in that area. Freedom of assembly association is mandated in the Constitution. Why do we always see a situation where if opposition political parties want to hold a rally, there's not enough manpower for them to be mined by the Zambia Police Service? But in the same vein, we see the Zambia Police Service being available to displace the same, assembly, purported assembly. So I think these are things that we don't want to see. We're a democratic state. If people want to gather, let them gather, let them be provided with security as provided for by the law. And we don't want to see the continued use of the Public Order Act to, basically deny people to assemble and to air their views. I think in a democratic space, it's very important to also hear critical and dissenting views, especially views that are dissenting to what the government in power is doing, because those are the only people that are actually telling you the truth. So I think it's very important for the government to start listening. It's in their own interest.
Okay, thank you so much, CP. I'll open it up to a last round of questions. Yes.
My name is Elijah. We spoke of public office bearers to be accounted the way they carry out their duties. I wanted to find out what are some of the measures that civil society are taking to cut these repeated mistakes. I'll call them mistakes because they can be changed. Like the start that that's where they sent $80 million to behind it by mistake. I wanted to find out, is there a way we can stop some of these irregularities? We are having a lot of challenges in the energy sector where we don't have power in most forms, like where I come from just one week, we don't have power. So there are businesses that will in the same way, they are struggling because of the same non-availability of power. Then there's also looming fuel crisis. And that was also because of, I think, poor planning, because I think there were supposed to be enough stocks to cater for this. So I wanted to find out, as civil society, you spoke of taking action, and that the government should be proactive with actions. As civil society, what do you do apart from this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
Just from Zambia. I want to find out how you rate government's performance in terms of making access to information.
Okay. One last question. Is that a hand or no? Okay. Any last question before we get the response? Okay. I'll pass it on to the high table.
Eliza, the question of civil servants circumventing the procedures and undesirable decisions being made, right? And what are we doing as civil servants? I'll start from our observation. What you're asking essentially is similar to what we've been asking in relation to the Auditor General's report. You will see that the lines of the expenditures where we lose money are the same. And every year there is an increment in the amount of money that we are losing. And therefore the question you should ask is, what is the systemic weakness that is driving this issue? And studies have been conducted, and most of the things that come out is that we need to work on strengthening internal controls, strengthening internal oversight. You gave an example of this, so I've not followed that closely, but the question I ask is, when a payment is being raised, minimum, there are 3 stages before a payment is signed off. You mean to tell me all the 3 stages didn't see anything wrong in that transaction? And it was only discovered after the disbursement had been done. That should tell you something, that we could be sitting on a situation where cartels have been created. And this is done from the lowest level to the highest level. But for those cartels to be created, there's extremely something wrong in the internal oversight systems and internal control systems. I know, for a fact, I worked in Ministry of General Education under one project where for me, as a Zambian, I can't say I discovered, I think I had an idea of what was happening. That when there is a workshop for operational officers or up to middle management, payments are made even to senior management, even if they do not attend. It's a routine, it's a culture. You understand? And it's wrong, these wrong cultures that are made normal, and whoever acts against this culture, they are identified and isolated. Somebody told me you can be promoted prematurely. You know what that means? Yes, you are promoted, sent in a rural area, no amenities, that's a demotion. But all these are behaviors that, first of all, sustain these, but also identifies and criminalizes, for lack of a better, people that want to show some level of integrity and stand out to say I cannot be part of it. So I think the call for us as civil society is to continue calling out government whenever there's an incident where we suspect that there was a lapse in oversight, a lapse in internal controls. But beyond that, we've been implementing a program called Institutional Integrity Strengthening Program for a number of years now. And we target public institutions. And one of the things that we do is to look at their core values as an institution, public institution. We look at the processes that they follow to deliver services. And when we identify any weaknesses, we work together to come up with counter or anti-corruption measures to strengthen their weaknesses. For example, we are talking about the service charters. The service charters is one way of opening up the institution to the public so that the public knows what happens when I want a national registration card from stage 1 to the last stage and the payments that I need. So that if someone asks me to pay less than what is required, it's good, I'm paying this, but the question is, no. But here you are saying too much, I want me to pay you 50 more. No, it doesn't make sense. So there are those things that we are doing. Apart from that, we were part of the public sector re-engineering program around 2007, which facilitated the establishment of open customer service center. You know what that does? In the past, you walk in an office, you close the door, transact with the officer there. But you see, that is a conducive environment for bribery, my friend. Because no one is seeing it. But when you bring business in an open like this, everyone is seeing what is happening. You know what you've done? You've lessened the possibilities of bribery procedures. So in a small way, we are contributing by collaborating with public institutions to strengthen someone. But it's not our mandate. Ours is to call out government to do the correct thing. And are we doing the correct thing? I leave it up to you to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe let me also add to that, and I'd like to start with where Mr. ended. I think the examples that he has given really give you an insight of some of the things that we are doing with entities within the public sector to sort of address some of these issues that we are facing. Another example I can give you, you know that we have every 2 years we do what we call the Zambia Right Payers Index, where we rank public institutions in terms of their vulnerability to bribery and things like that. And on the basis of that, we have actually worked very closely with the Zambia Police Service, for example, to come up with an ethics and integrity manual or model for their training program. So what this shows you is that as civil society, we are playing a role. But also, you need to understand that as civil society, we have certain intentions, but we have a and I think the examples that we mentioned. What are you as civil society doing? I think the question should be, what are we as Zambians doing in terms of these anomalies that we're seeing within our governance arena, within the anti-corruption arena? Because it's not just the job of TIZ, it's not just the job of the Anti-Corruption Commission, it's the job of all of us, including you as the media and journalists. As a matter of fact, you as journalists have got a very critical role to play in this. you will know that some of the biggest corruption scandals that we have seen in this country, whether you're talking about Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, they have actually come to the fore because of the work of journalists such as yourselves who have gone in and investigated and actually brought out issues. So my challenge to you, which I'm throwing to you, Elijah, but generally to the media, is that please be able to address some of these issues that we are seeing, because we have a critical role to play, and we challenge you to actually play that. We are playing our part, but this is these are issues that require concerted efforts, and it will not just be, the war will not just be won because TIZ is doing this, but it will be won because all of us are bringing our collective efforts together in order to address some of these anomalies. Let me quickly respond to Sichon's question about how we rate the performance of the government in terms of implementing that information law. I think that it's a bit too soon for us to sort of give a very categorical position of that. As you know, the law was passed this year or early this year, and this was following a very long time of advocacy, a very long time of engaging with different players. And I think at the time when the law was actually put in place, we did commend the government because we think that it was a very positive development. Because this is something that we had been pushing about, I think, for the best part of 20 years or even more. And so to see the law actually being put in place, being enacted, we thought that that was a very positive development, and we did speak to that effect. I think the statutory instrument to operationalize it has also been put in place. And so that, again, is something that is positive. But for us, we are now keen to see how this law is going to be implemented. And in fact, we'd like to throw a challenge even to you as the media that we should test this law now, because we have the law in place, it has been operationalized. So think about ways in which you can actually put the law to the test to see whether it is actually going to be achieving the sort of results that it is envisioned to achieve. We've got our own ideas as TIZ for how we want to test this law, and we're going to be doing that in the course of the year. But I would like to challenge you as the media to also actually put this law to the test so that we can see whether it actually achieves the objectives for which it has been set. So the simple answer to your question is that it's a bit too soon, I think, to give a very categorical rating as to how the implementation of this law has been, because it has just been put in place, and so we'll be keen to see how the implementation will be rolled out.
I think I can just add to Ichiza's question on the access to information. As TIZ, we actually did a government diagnostic assessment follow-up report based on the assessment that was done by the IMF in terms of some of the governance issues that this administration needs to address as a prerequisite for the program. So we are hoping to release that study early next year, if not late this year. But we actually had an indicator around access to information. And as ED has stated, I think the metric was for the access to information law to be enacted, which has been. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to go into actually implementing the law. Of course, as you might be aware, Human Rights Commission has been mandated to help implementation of the law, particularly when access to information is denied. And initially, they did not have, I think, the capacity or even the staff to be able to facilitate that role. But a lot has been done in terms of next year's budgetary allocations. I think we saw that the budget has allocated more to the Human Rights Commission in terms of hiring the needed staff, particularly from the legal fraternity. But also we know that the Human Rights Commission, working with the Ministry of Information, is developing rules and guidelines in terms of how access to information can be implemented and operationalized. So we're hoping that next year we'll see tremendous movement and that we'll be able to, as citizens, actually test this law and get access to information. But I also wanted to say that Chusa's question, I think, is very related to Elijah's question. When you look at some of these scandals, particularly the first one, which is very interesting, it also relates to issues to do with access to information and transparency. And just to note that in our work as TIZ, the energy sector is not one where we've delved in completely. But from the mining sector point of view, I think if you draw a comparison worldwide, I think globally, even regionally, The energy sector is one that has not been subject to a lot of scrutiny and transparency, which is quite ironic. But as TIZ, through one of our projects, one of the things that we've been trying to do is engage the Energy Regulation Board, as well as ZESCO around the concept of contract transparency. So as some of you might know, in the provision of energy, power, or fuel, whatever it is, the government goes into contracts with suppliers. So I'll give an example. In the power sector, we know that, for instance, ZESCO signs a number of agreements, some of them power supply agreements, power purchase agreements, and I think was it a week ago, last week, the Energy Regulation Board had a press briefing announcing how many power purchase agreements they had approved. And so our engagements have focused on possibilities of having certain information disclosed in those agreements and contracts so that it's easier for us to hold the government and the duty bearers accountable for what is signed and committed to in those contracts. I think to avoid a repeat of what happened in the previous regime where we saw huge data obtained through the power sector and the energy crisis. And so that is also part of our work in terms of engaging duty bearers to ensure that even as we await for the operationalization of access to information, but what strides can be made to make some of this information available. And then lastly, with regards to, I think, and related to access to information transparency, when it comes to these scandals, I think that's why we kind of overemphasize the role of whistleblowers who work in the public service, who have been key, I think, in most of some of our cases to bring this information to light. And we've also been working with stakeholders to strengthen the whistleblower law, which is the Public Disclosure Act, as some of the provisions actually deter people from, blowing the whistle and reporting concerns when they see that there is corruption in our administration happening. So I think there is a lot that we are doing as TIZ, but as my ED said, I think it's not only TIZ, it's working in collaboration with other civil society organizations, but also the media. And I think posing a challenge to ourselves and the media is to follow up on some of these issues. I know that as Zambians generally, we move on to the next scandal and to the next, forgetting that some of the issues have been unresolved. And I think it's a challenge that we continue to follow up some of these issues to ensure that there is accountability and that there is justice at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, very briefly.
Thank you so much. With one question down TV. On the investigations involving the solicitor, as TIZ, do you think there's been a draft? Like, how soon do you expect an institution that wants to have information to just bring us final investigations? Things update how far they've gone with and are you not concerned about the day?
Well, I think we have addressed that quite substantially in our statement. Of course, we are concerned about this, which is precisely why we're raising it in our statement. So yes, the process appears to be dragging and it has taken long. And so the challenge that we've thrown to the SEC is that let them give the nation an update in terms of where we are. So yes, we are very concerned. So concerned that we have even included it in our statement and we have thrown this challenge to them. We can't really tell to say when do we want it to be done or when do we expect it to be done. We expect it to be done as soon as possible. Really. So the challenge really that we've thrown to the administration, or rather to the SEC, is for them to give the nation an update, because they did announce that the Solicitor General was under investigation, and that was the last we heard of it. So yes, we are concerned, and we are so concerned that we are throwing this challenge to the SEC. Say, please update the nation, because we cannot just whet people's appetite by telling them there's this that is going on, and then you go quiet for the rest of the period. So we are actually calling for there to be a very comprehensive update in terms of where we are with that particular investigation. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we have actually addressed it in our statement.
I think that's it actually in addition to the call in relation to the cabinet ministers. There were allegations that were investigations involving cabinet ministers. And our call is, can we have an update? Can decisive action be taken? I think it's very important that these issues are concluded. They are also concluded timely. So it's a core, it's a concern because we're coming towards the end of the year. And I think this is why in a number of occasions we say when office holders, there are allegations leveled against them in terms of corruption, we want them to step aside so that there's no interference in investigations. So I think those are issues that are issues of concerns, and we hope we're going to receive an update. The nation will be updated in the appropriate manner by the appropriate institution.
Okay, even aside for Mr. Mtale to give the closing remarks, he can also give his comment.
Without adding to what CP and BP are saying, for me, just one thing, consistency. First of all, consistency in the protocols that they are executing to communicate. In one instance, they will communicate when they just call someone for questioning. That excites citizens, not so. In other instances, they will communicate to give you the progress over some issue they communicated. So just the level of consistency that can we be clear on at which time you need to communicate to the public so that we stop seeing this update as somewhat politically motivated. Number two, consistency in terms of when you cite Raymond as someone being investigated, there are things that we expect to be done. Raymond should not be comfortable reporting for work and going into his office while being investigated. There's a danger in terms of the investigation. So those are some of the things we are asking, that it should be clear. How do we communicate to the public when we're investigating someone? How do we treat someone that is investigated? That way, we'll actually respect the institutions that are investigating, but also we'll take your updates seriously. But if you come to us because you're under pressure, or you come to us because you've been quiet for 3 months, or you come to us because it's convenient in that week to say you are doing a disservice to the institution. So I think predictability is important, and governance institutions should be predictable. Governance institutions should be consistent, and that's a challenge I think we throw to government.
Okay. So, with those your closing remarks,
I was answering the question. So, in closing, I just want to thank first of all our CP for taking time to come and be part of this press briefing. I know you are busy, but you took time to come and be part of this process. I also want to thank the members, TIZ members, and 2 board members that found time to come and be part of the process. We appreciate your taking time to be part of this process. Obviously, I want to thank you, the media, for coming today, but also to thank you for working with us through this year. I think we've had a number of interventions together, and just to thank you for committing to be part of this process. I don't know if Zambia has explained to you, we have a concept around a community of practice for media houses, and we work together. We speak the same language. And when we are, for example, disseminating the CPI, we don't have a pre-dissemination workshop. You come to a level where you understand the CPI and you communicate appropriately. And that is the thinking behind this community of practice of media houses. And we want to encourage you to continue participating. But what is important maybe is to reflect on your own. Are there lessons we are taking from working together this year? What is working well? What is not working well? Would like that information through your interaction with Zambia so that we strengthen our collaboration going into 2025. Tamika did challenge us that sometimes we forget important issues that our government commits to in the year. I want to make a suggestion. Whether it makes sense, I don't know. As media, maybe create a bank where you'll be throwing big and what term do I want? Okay, those issues that we consider very important that are coming from government. So that every 3 months you check in your bank, see whether there is any movement that government has made. If no movement, call them out. Because if we keep quiet, we are participating in talking about something, throw it away, wait for another thing to talk about, will not help our country to move in the right direction. So we need to take stock of whatever commitments government is doing and follow them through quarterly, so that when we meet like this, we can actually reference what you said. We reminded government 3 times this, and nothing has happened. We reminded government 1 time and nothing has happened. That way we are actually speaking from evidence, speaking from experience. And if we did that together, I don't know how Zambia integrate that in your interaction with the media. I think we'll be working together to play our watchdog role, make government awake. They shouldn't sleep when they are working. So we need to push them and ensure that we do the correct thing. So let me end by wishing you the very best as you look forward to your Christmas and New Year. And we hope to meet again next year. Zanji, housekeeping issue.
Okay, thank you so much. So very quickly, we have some snacks outside. So we're going to go in prayer. Mr. Najib, you're supposed to give us another prayer. So now we have a closing prayer. There's some snacks outside. And also please see me for your logistics. And if you're not in the group, because I'm going to share the press briefing, the soft copy press statement, rather. And there's a group text. Yeah, so if you're not in that group, please see me. So I'm Mr. Nachinga.
Let us pray. Gracious loving Father, we want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to meet and discuss national matters. Heavenly Father, we pray that whatever has been discussed, let it be that which is going to change our governance structure and also improve our lives. As we are going to depart, Heavenly Father, we will before us, that this is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
So,